we've had a couple of questions about buildings and earthquakes and tsunami. So Natasha would like to know one piece of advice you'd give to someone building a new home to make it more resilient to large earthquakes. And Janet here has a question. She'd like to know if engineering solutions can reduce the impacts of tsunami, or if we need to build new developments elsewhere. So Liam and perhaps William, what are your top tips for someone building a new home to make it more resilient? And can engineering solutions help mitigate the impact of tsunami on buildings?
Okay, I'll take the first one. I think a lot of these tips have actually already been said earlier in the talk today. So if we think about the sort of buildings residential buildings we have, they actually perform pretty well by themselves during shaking. So we've got timber frame buildings, usually a lightweight roof. If you're just shaking those, they're usually going to do pretty well. If you don't have a brick chimney, that's usually a good thing. You're not probably going to build a new house with a brick chimney. So that removes sort of one hazard. And we talked before about the fix and fasten. So it's really a lot of what you can do is related to what an engineer calls non-structural elements, which sounds very horrible, but it's all your bits and pieces that you have in the house that makes your house a home. Ensuring that those are secured, because it's really them shifting around. If they're not secured, that's what can cause a lot of the damage and a lot of the cost. So I'd say that's a big piece. And maybe the key thing is really a good foundation. So what's supporting your building, and depending on the sort of soil conditions, if you build a foundation that can deal with a little bit of shifting and movement around, then that can help to predict the structure above from things like liquefaction, and you can that would be a really key thing to apply for. And there's a lot of information on the EQC website about all those different aspects of what you can do for yourself. I can pass the tsunami one on to William, and maybe he can bounce back afterwards and see if there's anything else I want to say.
Okay, so can we use engineering to make buildings safer from tsunamis? And is that an alternative to not developing in tsunami-prone areas? Certainly, engineering can be part of the mix. For residential buildings, I would personally say that the main thing is making sure that people can make a timely evacuation is the higher priority than building residential buildings for tsunami safety. It's very difficult to predict exactly how big or how strong a tsunami is going to be. So, how do we know what level of engineering we would need to have a building that you would want to stay in during a tsunami? I think is a very difficult question. For other kinds of infrastructure, I think it makes a lot of sense. So, if you have a pipeline or a port or something that you really want to have operational quickly after a tsunami, I think it certainly makes a lot of sense to engineer it to be resilient. But residential, for me, it's more about the evacuation. But Liam, can I ask your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think maybe on the residential side of things, a flexible, lightweight frame, which is good for an earthquake, may not perform as well as a tsunami. But if you think about the balance of cost to invest, you're never going to try to build a residential house, a single-story house. It's much more about, as you said, understanding to try to be able to evacuate. It's only really when you move to maybe multi-story, larger developments, apartment complexes, those sorts of things, which are usually more robust in terms of their design, that we've seen evidence that like a reinforced concrete frame building, for example, can perform fairly well in a tsunami, and it allows you for an ability to move up through that building to evacuate up outside of the depth range of that tsunami inundation.
I just wanted to throw in a personal anecdote if I could. Is that all right?
Go for it, Rob. Yeah.
Yeah, so when the Kaikoura earthquake struck in 2016, I was actually asleep in this very room. It was our bedroom, and on the side we had a fireplace and a chimney. attached to this room, and of course the fireplace was actually damaged. And once I went in the field as part of the earthquake response teams, I noticed a lot of damaged chimneys in Marlborough related to shaking and ground damage along the fault systems. And so I was immediately aware that my house had a major hazard associated with it being that chimney. So in my time off in between response sessions, I was manually taking that chimney down. And I think one thing I'd like to say is we're really lucky in New Zealand that we've got this thing called the Earthquake Commission that chips in and helps out with damage that occurs after earthquakes, and is able to help fund and repair New Zealand buildings, houses.